We're good, we're live. Okay, well, Roman, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
On the podcast, episode 2. And I want to jump right into talking about the reason why I wanted to have you on in the first place was I think you have a really unique take on the real estate side of your business and the renovation side. So for those of you that don't know Roman, firefighter, real estate guy, construction renovator.
Tradesman.
Yeah. And what I thought was really cool, so there's 2 videos I saw recently that you did on Instagram, I think it was Reels.
Yep.
Is I guess you guys had a house in Lindenwoods, and it's you and your partner, and you guys go in and you start going around. And the thing about Lindenwoods homes that Kristi and I don't like is like it's all this like all the oak, the old wood trim, and you guys then provided the renders to help people visualize what the home could look like.
Yeah.
And that was a really cool take and idea, because that's the biggest thing is like me going into that house, I wouldn't have thought, oh, it could look that beautiful, that open. And you did the same thing with the home in Charleswood.
Yeah.
So just tell me about where you guys came up with that concept, how things are going with that side of business.
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to probably 16, 17, like the year. I'm pretty bored with things in my house and how things look, right?
Yeah.
And I love to socialize. Back then I was known for always throwing parties and having people over. And so I was having conversations with a lot of buddies, girlfriends and wives at that time. And, you know, I was listening to what they were saying, right? So I kind of figured, I was like, maybe I have a knack for design, right? So every time somebody would come over, they would be like, hey, last time I was here, this place looked completely different. And my house was going through renovation, head to toe, all that kind of stuff. So then I made the decision to go and get some sort of interior design knowledge and education, which I did. And then that's kind of what started. So I took that.
Sorry, so what did you take? You did like a design course?
Yeah, I took a course. Yeah, a correspondence course from an institute in BC called Design Interior. What was it called? I can't remember what the heck
it was. Like an online course?
Yeah. Cool. So it had modules. You go through it from head to toe. You learn the history. It was good because there's a lot of things, you know, the entire world is built on design, right? Like elements, principles, why things look the way they are, why we look the way they are we dressed the way we are. And it also, so what I took after that was because I'm a painter by trade, it enhanced my vocabulary for painting through the roof. You know, so being able to romance color really well, understanding it really well, just helped me in the business, right? So, but at the same time, when I got out of there, I was like, you know, there's all these programs out there. I tried learning AutoCAD, which is like learning AutoCAD by yourself is not fun at all, right? So I started with some of these other programs, and I was just playing around, and then I found this one. It was called Foyer Neo. And what it allows me to do is it allows me, one, to upload floor plans. If you were to build a house, I can create anything. I can stage 4K render stuff. I can walk through, and it allows me to change in and out textures, finishings really quickly, right? So,
cool.
So that's kind of, I got to a place after that course where I was like, well, how am I going to take what I learned and apply it to my business, right? So I said that for the painting part, it helped. And then I really wanted to get into more design type of work, right? So the last couple of years before I got into real estate, I kind of tried branding myself as like a design consultant, right? Yep. So, you know, I had the knack to talk to both parties. So if it came to construction talk, we can talk that way. And if it came to a design talk, I can talk that way as well. And it helped. So it helped with guys on the fire department because guys are either renovating. So I'm always talking shop in that regard.
Yeah.
And it also helps when you're just shooting it with, you know, the wife and whatnot. So that was kind of that. And then I took that program. I gave, honestly, weeks, maybe months of my life to turning it into like profit and time and how to build these things so it doesn't take me 7 days to build something and expedite it.
I was going to say, because in the videos, like the rendering you guys provide, because again, so have you already purchased the home and now you're showing the renders?
No, these houses right now. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to show 2 aspects. So we're trying to find houses that we can create appreciation and houses where we can teach people about building equity within them.
Gotcha.
Right. And then that always comes with renovations. So these typically are listings on the market either within our own brokerage or we actually just contact the realtor and we literally just give them free marketing because this is.
Well, I was going to say that's a lot. It seems like a lot of work to do ahead of time.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. It is. And right now, because we are pretty new into real estate, it's about building our brand. So we believe that we have a very unique brand coming into real estate. So right now we just enjoy the process of what we're doing because it's not very hard for us because we have such an understanding of what's going on. Yeah. And as Tim and I, my partner in real estate, we're just gelling really well and synergizing into roles and responsibilities. Yeah. So when it takes me the time to create these renders, he's the one that's editing the videos, and we're practicing with different types of apps to create those contents, right? So yeah, it's really unique. That one in Charleswood, it was difficult because it's a bi-level too, right? Yeah. So it's not just a flat floor. So I had to create different levels, make sure the roofs are the same size and the ceilings are the same sizes, right? So yeah, it's and it's something that I always found that wasn't out there. And back to that program, even with when I said I was design consulting, I didn't even find people doing that. It's like, I've built a house, you guys have done it, and if you've ever worked with a designer, they're going to charge you a lot of money, and then they tell you to build a $1 million house, $500,000 house, and you get a sample piece that's this big, this big, this big, and you have to make these massive decisions, right? So I was learning this program, I'm like, well, what if I create specifically the kitchen, the great room, and the primary bathroom, right? Yeah. And help visualize what people want to choose, right? If they have these options, I'm like, I can create them. I actually can pull them off of the sites and put them into the program, which is pretty unique, right? So if you wanted to see smoke-stained cabinets, we can do that. If you wanted to see traditional, just white, different marbles, quartzes, it doesn't matter. I just plug them in and out really quickly.
Well, no, it's great. And I think you're providing a lot of value in a market that's saturated with real estate agents. Everyone's getting in there and trying to be unique in some way. And that's where when I saw these videos, like, man, like these are, not only are they well shot videos, but the renderings, it made me be like, okay, maybe I could move to Lindenwoods. Yeah. And Kristi and I had never thought about it. Kristi was like, is he using AI to build those? I was like, I don't know. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it right off the bat. Well, because I was like, I don't think so. Because it's like, I don't know if AI is that advanced yet, but because it does look like it would be a lot of work. And
one of them is it's the elements and principles of design. So what I really love about that program is being able to use natural light and the sun, and that's what makes it look so real. So I actually have a little test with some of my buddies, and when I get a compliment like yourselves, I go, "Do you think that was a real renovation or a render?" And I swear, 8 out of 10 times they think it's a real renovation, right? Yeah,
which is good. I've been fooled online before. So just how long would it take you, when you're to build out something like that?
I'm getting really quick at them. Nice thing about Winnipeg is a lot of the older homes are all the same type of build, and then they're just constructed a little bit differently. So I have a lot of base plans now that I just kind of tinker with from there. But usually it takes me, 2 days. And then I like to play around with it because I might build it out, but then I'm like, oh, I like this style, and then I'm like, maybe I'll try this a little bit, and then add a different accent here, maybe stage it a little more or a little bit less, and then when I play with the shots, that's probably what takes me the most time, is actually finding the shot that I like the best, that brings in that realistic look. Because that's the selling point too.
But when you're starting, are you taking photos and bringing those in, or are you doing measurements? Like, how do you build it out?
I take photos so I can just reference how it looks, and then measurements are just for the wall's 10 feet here, right? So I have 10 feet, and then understanding when you're staging a room that things need to be X amount apart and it's dialed in a certain way, right? And have a flow to it essentially, right?
Well, and as someone in marketing, design, and you feel like when things are off balance, even in our home when Kristi and I are putting up art, you can just tell when things feel off. Oh yeah. And someone walks into a house, and sometimes you have an eye for it. You did some schooling for it. I never have, but you can you just have a sense. You're like, this art piece isn't quite big enough, or the island feels off, or you just kind of get a sense for it. So
and that's just understanding the principles, right? So if you don't understand those, then you can put anything in there, and it might not make sense because you need to harmonize, you need to repetition, right? You need to balance things out, right? You might want to put all that stuff in there, and it just might not work in the end, right?
Yeah, we try to always keep things really simple if we can, and use like we love mid-century modern furniture,
Right,
but people tend to just like pack things into their spaces. I'm like, if you just removed a couple furniture pieces, this place would feel way bigger. And the funny thing growing up is my dad's a carpenter and horrible at design. If he's listening, sorry, Pops, but you are. And my mom loves to paint and all this, but he, great. He could construct something, but he never had that education. Whatever. He just did things that look good. But again, there's a different level of, I think, like quality and design center when you see someone that knows what they're doing in terms of like how to, because the renovation flip side, I grew up doing that with him. It's tough.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're different jobs, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, the designer's one job, a GC's another job. All the trades you bring in, those are all their individual jobs, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's the unique thing about us is that we've been a part of all of that, right?
Yeah.
And so now with Tim, I'm like, he's a journeyman carpenter. So it's when we're talking like real shop, it's like go to him. I'm like, when we want to talk of why things should look the way they should, then we talk with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then if we want to play with ideas, then, same thing. And Tim's actually a very creative guy too, which is what's nice about our relationship and how really the world brought us back together. Like we got hired together on the fire department at the same time. We're one reg number off. We're the same age. We were doing the same things on our own side of life at the same time. And then fast forward 10 years and this idea is now turned into a business and something we're both passionate about and was the door that opened, I think, for both of us during, our journey and our growth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you talk about partnerships too, that's important. I've had a lot of failed partnerships.
Oh yeah.
And you need someone that balances you. Like your one partner does the videos, another partner maybe is more in the construction. But if you can come together and if you have the same creative mindset, same values, same drive, that's where you have something special.
Yeah.
And that's the balance, because there's nothing worse than being in a partnership where, and I've learned this time and time again, where if you don't have a good understanding of who's doing what at the start, and if there's too much overlap in your skill set, then you actually will find that you're feeling like you're doing all the work, one person's not doing enough.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That kind of thing. So that balance is really important.
Yeah, oh yeah. And we kind of, when we were first starting, that's what we had to figure out, right? He got licensed a little bit before me, and then, so I was really concentrating on the business side of stuff and the branding and how we were going to market what we're doing and being focused on what's in my head and how we're going to deliver that, because that's essentially the biggest thing that we can do. I didn't want to just jump into the real estate game and then expect to just start buying people's houses and selling other people's houses. You know what I mean? I'm like, we have a point that we need to stay focused on, and I reference it's a turtle race. It's not the rabbit race for us. Yeah. And we're playing chess and not checkers right now.
Yeah.
So,
well, and to that point, what's interesting, I think trades guys should get into real estate. Like it's a good mix, because for myself, growing up in it with my dad and with the real estate agents we've used, our buddy Mike Mason, who's our real estate guy. What I love is like takes me through a house, and he's seen it so many times. And again, I don't think he's a trades guy, but what I like about it is the education side of it. And that's what you bring too.
Yeah.
And Mike takes us through, and he's like, hey, this is something you got to worry about, this, that. That's where the value comes in for me.
Exactly.
And I think when I first talked to you about this at hockey, you mentioned that, again, one of the things, if someone's selling a home, what can you do a small investment to get a big return right before you list? That's also big. Even like, God, you and I both know painting's the easiest thing you can do. Yeah. But sometimes there's other little things that you could do, because it's people just want to get their house in the market. But it's like, man, they're losing out on so much equity if they could just 100%. Put a little bit into
a little bit of effort.
Yeah, right? A little bit of effort. Yeah. And that's where you can help too, because you can be the listing agent.
The biggest trade used in real estate is paint. Right? Like your realtor's always coming in, you should probably paint the first floor out, right? Repaint all this, make it look clean.
People leave their houses with like pink, purple walls and shit. I'm like, what are you guys doing?
Six different colors.
And people that are looking at those homes can't get past it.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Well, they look at it as work. So it's like, oh, I'm going to buy this and bid on it, and then now I have to do all this work to it.
We got lucky because Kristi really did the majority of looking for a house but COVID was the worst. Everything was selling for 150, 200 over. And we're like, I'm not paying the prices people are paying for these houses. So we waited, interest rates went up a little bit. We actually got our place about 100 under asking, but the big reason why it wasn't selling, because it's fully renovated. Right. And one of the things I hated about Charleswood growing up is like people in Charleswood, no offense, mom and dad, but it's like they'll renovate like a floor and the floors don't match and everything. I wanted everything that was just consistent, you know? And so our house was, but the reason why it wasn't selling is because they left things dirty. They didn't put like the cupboards in properly. It was like a lot of these little things that I'm like, okay, I can get past it because I know how to fix all these things, but they lost out probably on $100,000 had they just done the little things.
For sure.
Yeah. Cleaning windows and like there was like flies and dirt. It's like all that kind of stuff. But
all of that's important, right? Like, I even find when I was going through my new subdivision for the parade of homes when they were going on, and I called out every builder when I'd walk in and the baseboards went caulked, and that's your show hole.
Yeah.
And your nail holes aren't. I'm like, you don't think somebody's going to come in and notice that? Yeah. And that's your product, right? Like that's your brand. I'm like, that's the easiest thing to finish. That would take a guy an hour to go around the house and finish that.
Yeah, you have like just an assistant or journey guy just going around doing a little final
finish
touches.
It up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That looks really bad. And then one thing, you know, and then coming back to the trade side of thing, one thing that I think that we're in trouble with is, and you mentioned, is like getting more guys into trades.
Yeah.
That is going to be a high paid skill.
Yeah.
And there's not
Well,
enough.
it already is.
Yeah.
Like the pandemic exposed how valuable trades are. Mm-hmm. And if you were a tradesperson, your business actually blew up pretty well. And if you stay focused, put your head down and put the work in. There's a stat that's been kind of just on social media that for every guy that's retiring now, you have to replace him with 7 years of experience, right?
Yeah.
And I was actually talking to my plumber, and he was we're talking the same type of conversation, and a senior like HVAC guy versus a junior, they're 200 numbers off of each other. I'm like, and that's 15, 20 years worth of experience.
I think plumbing's one of the hardest ones because like nobody plumbing's not a sexy thing to get into.
But
exactly, man,
right.
they're the highest
there's
paid trade.
paint. I'm like, how many? And that's why I when I look back at that decision, it was one of the best decisions I ever made because everybody either went into electrician or carpentry, right? Yeah. And then someone goes into paint. It's like, what the heck is that? I'm like,
sorry, did you go to school for paint or did you just start painting?
No, so I started working for a company called 5 Star Painting in St. Vital area, and then after I moved on from them, I got a job with a management company. That's where I was apprenticed, and I expedited my apprenticeship. I was done my apprenticeship in 3 months.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, because I just kind of learn.
Work hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and active, athletic, fit, all that. So the work didn't bug me. Like my shoulders are. I can put them above my head for 8 hours, no problem doing ceilings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how that kind of turned into that. So within that job, that was kind of what forecasted me learning all the acquired skills too, right? So when I was working for this management company, I was the young guy, so they gave me the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And then there'd be holes bigger than this table in front of us, and they'd be like, "Well, we need you to replace the drywall and fix it." So I literally taught myself how to tape by doing that. And it was just practice, repetition. We didn't have the internet back then the way we do now, where you can YouTube everything, which is fine. But that's where I learned how to get in, like properly drywalling and then properly taping, and then that evolved into tiling, and that kind of revolved into just understanding all those finishing trades at the same time.
Well, the finishing I was never big on, but I learned how to fix holes in drywall at buddies' parties. It was hey, Kasev, can you fix this? I'm like, I can fix that for you. Yeah, I'll figure it out. Like 14 coats later, I think it's flat. I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, man. It's like, whoop. I remember a party when we were in high school, and one of the guys put a hole in it where the parents started telling he put a can of like an empty can of tuna in there, and then I don't know how they got it, and then they mudded over top of it. And it's just like
anything as a backing.
Yeah, I was like, I could have came and fixed this for you tomorrow, but and then you guys wanted to expedite it real quick, but that's funny. It's just young.
Exactly, young and dumb. But painting was something that I did. It was interesting. So I went to university. I did a commerce degree over about a 7-year period, a couple years longer than I should have. But I always painted in the summers, and I loved painting. It was like great money. Yeah. I worked off referrals. I think I did an Italian family, and I did like everyone in that family. It was like, again, referrals, good work. They're like, oh, you paint houses? Yeah, paint my house. Yeah. I painted one house pink, which was weird. Wasn't my choice, but whatever they want. But I used to love it. I was like, it's like that feeling. That was my first sense of being my own boss. And that's something today that, although I think you and I have both gone through the gamut of like if you're going to run your own business, you're going to work more hours than you'll ever work if you're on your own, or working for someone else, right? Yeah. But what happens is I find being on your own and being your own boss and a founder of something is you have this freedom. Like, yeah, sure, I work Saturdays. I've given up on countless golf games. I don't have time. Saturdays, Sundays off to work because you have to work those days, but it doesn't feel like work the same way working for someone else is, like you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's and you're learning that young is it's such an incredible feeling, right?
Yeah.
And I think, if, for how we've kind of channeled that growing up, I have never really felt like I've ever had a boss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, I've had guys look over me for a while, but then I'd be on my own, right? Here's your POs and go do all the work, right?
Yeah.
And then when I started the thing with my brother, it was, just our responsibility, our word of mouth,
Yeah.
Our reputation and whatnot. Even the fire department, I'm like, I really don't have a boss. I have a captain who's a supervisor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, we have
Yeah.
a great crew and great people. So it's not that traditional. Here's your 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Go to work. Here's your 30 minutes of lunch.
Well-
Because that I'm like, I sometimes you don't eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't take breaks because it's just when you start working, I'm like, you're there to work. And that's what it is.
Yeah, and I think so. It's funny. I've been fired from about 20 jobs. So growing up, I would just take advantage. Every time I got fired from a job, I just go work for my dad. My dad's like, yeah, come work. But
Perfect.
I always had an issue. It wasn't that I wasn't a hard worker. I'm a hard worker. I didn't respect the people I worked for, and if you were someone who just
that's
were demanding
culture,
of
right?
me, yeah, and were demanding me to do things, but you weren't working
Willing
yourself.
to do yourself, yeah.
Yeah, and so when the last job I had was at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and here's the other thing: because I painted every summer, when I got out of university, I couldn't get a job. Like no one would hire me. So like, where do you go? It's like Enterprise is like the McDonald's of getting into the workforce. So it's like you're making $30,000 a year, working 60 hours a week and Saturdays, wearing a suit, washing cars, whatever. But one thing I'll say about Enterprise is they had a really great culture and training program. I went out, they flew us out to Montreal to play in a hockey tournament, which was really
nice.
cool. So and again, so nothing to knock them, but you learn a lot of lessons. Like you think having a degree is getting a job. No, it's like, and even what I value now is running my business, I'll put experience ahead of education any day of the week.
100%.
Like had you not told me you had created the design course and you were looking for a job in interior design and I saw your videos, I'd be like, I'd hire you. Yeah. It's not about education. It's about show the experience and put some effort into things. And I tell young people that all the time.
That's the thing for the young people.
Yeah.
It's life experience is what you need.
Yeah.
Your university degree, I'm like, and you change your mind a couple of times. I'm like, it doesn't guarantee you a job at the end of the day.
People are my age now talking about going back. And I'm like, why? I'm like, and also because one thing you mentioned is you like reading books too, and I love it. I'm like always learning and self-educating, and you can. It's so much easier than ever to do that. And then I think where people get, I think this is my assumption, where people get blocked in their frame of mind that they need to go is because, okay, if I learned something on my own, how do I apply it? And they feel like if they go out to university, maybe they're going to learn the skill and then how to apply it, but it's not the case. I'm like, you do the same learning online as in university. It's that leap between like, okay, I learned something like what you did with your design course. I learned something. Now I'm going to start applying it.
Exactly.
If you don't apply it, then it doesn't matter what you learned.
Exactly.
You have to be able to do those things. And it's really hard at first.
For sure. Yeah.
It sucks. Like,
well, and I never went to university, so I can't really speak too well, but I'm like, you go there and they tell you need to take this course with this and this and this, and it's what's applicable, to where you want to go.
I'll give you my personal example. I went to university. I'm in digital marketing. There was nothing about digital marketing in university. I learned digital marketing. We went on a trip to Florida. This was like 15 years ago, and I bought the Search Engine Marketing for Dummies book.
Okay.
I was so embarrassed I bought it, but I was like, you know what? I want to learn how to build websites, do digital marketing. I have a marketing degree. But I'm like, if someone else can do it, and that's where I started. And I just I read the entire book. I took notes, and then I started building websites for people before I had a website, and because it was on trust.
Yeah.
I was like, and I didn't make any money the first 5-6 years at all. And that's another big thing is people will come to me with an idea of say, I have a way of making a lot of money. I'm like, don't do it. If you're worried about, if you think you're gonna make a lot of money, like try going 5 years without making any money.
Right.
And then you're like, because it's hard to get people to wrap that time frame around them. I like literally like any of the side projects and stuff I start now, I'm like, I'm not gonna make any money in this for 4 or 5 years. That's fine. I can deal with that.
Well, that's a typical business.
But everyone thinks they're just gonna make money. I'm like, nobody understands how hard it is to get a customer.
Yeah.
Acquire a customer and then make that project profitable.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like I lost so much money on so many projects, and even today, it still happens. It's it's hard. It's like, because all of a sudden, costs get inflated for things, for people, for labor.
For sure.
You can't find people. But I think it's like, what I want people to understand through this podcast is like, it's easier to get started than you think, but it's harder to keep going because you know what I mean? Like you're going to
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I just saw, I like this, it's a, like a proverb, not really a proverb, but it came across my Instagram the other day, and there's a Chinese bamboo plant. And when they plant it, you need to water it every single day for 5 years before it starts growing. But what grows to full length in 9 days.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So that's the focus, right? It's like, you know, even, you know, when we were talking earlier, it's like with my background and when I met my wife, I had a massive issue with like my tires being pumped and some of the support was great. But when I met my wife, it's like, you really don't understand what they're saying.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was like, the resume looks great, but you really don't know what it takes to make that resume look so damn good, you know, and even they don't understand that, you know, at the end of the day too. Like they see parts of it, the parts you want to show. And I never used to be, I might have had Instagram for about 3 years now. Before that, I wasn't a social media guy, but I understood what you need to do in today's world if you want to brand yourself, market yourself. I always thought my work would speak for itself. And, you know, I actually just liked the path that I was going on in that time. I had a lot of work and it was in the right idea, but I just kept growing. So I was like, if I keep growing, I can't keep thinking the same way either, right?
Yeah.
You know, so and I just saw what other friends were doing and how well they branded themselves, even though their brand was nothing, but they were just showing face. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was huge for what they were doing.
The hardest thing, and this is the hardest thing, is putting yourself out there, because you know your buddies are gonna, especially like our friends, they're gonna say things and whatever. But at the end of the day,
see the fire department.
I can imagine.
Yeah. It's not the worst, but like I get the chirps for sure.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because it's, you know, I'm not the guy sports betting. I'm not the guy playing games on my phone. I'm literally doing business or learning something that's of value on my downtime.
Yeah, and to your point before too, nobody really understands the sacrifice. And honestly, I got over caring about what other people thought a long time ago. If you care about what other people really think, you're just going to stop yourself from doing things constantly.
Yeah, you'll hesitate.
And to your point, like with my wife, with Kristi, like I said, we've been together for 10 years now, and my life's just gotten incrementally better with her. And we went through a lot of stuff too, but she, as someone who had so many things on the go and goals in life, and I still have those things, like I needed a partner that understood, that could understand me, and you need to be left alone. Like, I'm like, sorry, like there's been a lot of family things I've had to miss. And people don't understand that. And then the other thing with our buddies, it's like, hey, well, why don't you come golfing Saturday? I'm like, I can't. I'm like, I got to work. They're like, yeah, but you work for yourself. I'm like, yeah, but Saturdays is the best day to get work done. And you can't, you're never going to understand that unless you're doing your own thing.
That, right?
No. And we love our boys, but it's, like you said, it's, entrepreneurship and running a business can be really lonely. And that's the reason why I like doing this podcast and talking to other founders, and honestly, some of the best people I've met in the last few months, some of the best conversations I've had in the last few months have been with other people I've just met that are doing their own thing. Yeah. Because we all go through the same stuff. Yeah. The same challenges, the same growing pains.
Well, and you know, even to your point there, it's like I actually started having an issue like at hockey. It's like, you know, most of these guys, no offense to them, but I'm like, and most people, I'm like, they live the same 6 months over and over and over. It's like, I don't want to talk about the same story that we talked about 100 times over, and that trip, the bandy trip that we went on and all this stuff, you know what I mean? Or this national tournament or whatever, this and that. And it's, you know, I sit there, I'm like, and I think to myself, I'm like, there's 20, you know, alpha male in here. Why aren't we talking business? Why don't we try to grow together? Why don't we try to, and I brought the ideas to guys at times, right? And I actually valued and appreciated the little that we have done in the dressing room, because I am a hermit, because I do not play fantasy football.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah, so I'm like, I have nothing to talk about really before the game or whatever. Yeah. But then when you and I pipe up about business, I'm like, I'm all over that. You know what I mean? And I would sit in a room all day and talk that. You know what I mean?
Well, me too. And I always feel awkward, because I'm like, that's what I love talking about, but I don't, you know, is it the right scenario? But on that team, particularly, that's where I'm like, yeah, I'm the same way, but on my other team, it's a little different. And that's where I just value these conversations too. So I'm glad you like talking about it, because I'll keep telling you about it. But you're right. It's just a different, it's like a different, it's a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. Like, unless you're living it. I mean, it's funny. Like, even yesterday I had one guy from my other, I have the two companies, AdEasy and Geo. At Geo said that he's quitting. But then what I did, I was like, well, he's like, but I can still work evenings and weekends. I'm like, well, why don't you just work the Saturday shift and I'll put the other guy on the weekday shift? And he's like, okay. So he's like not quitting, he's just moving to a different shift.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of thing that comes up every single day. The thing about that I learned with business is, when you think you're doing really well, just expect something shitty is going to happen.
Oh, it's going to happen quick. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just like this, like sometimes. But it doesn't bother me. I know what's going to happen. I'm ready for it. I've learned so many lessons over the years, and it just takes time to learn those lessons. I think
it's problem solving. You know, it's part of it's everyday life. It's just you have to adapt it into business all the time. And
here's the unique thing about you, though. So you have this, like, I love what you're doing in the real estate as a trades guy. How are you balancing this with also being a firefighter? Because you guys work 4 on 4 off.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you must never stop.
I don't. Yeah.
This is why you don't drink. This is why you look so good.
Honestly,
that's why you're fit.
To tell you the truth, that was probably, well, there's one other reason, but the biggest reason with even just the booze was I didn't want to be, like, I'm a social drinker too, right? Yeah. So I'm never a guy after hockey that wants a beer, and you know, I can actually go out and not have a drink and all that and still enjoy my night, but I just couldn't hack the 2 days that would take me to recoup.
Yeah.
And then my mindset has just changed over reading, you know, these couple of books in the last couple of months and understanding, like, the most successful entrepreneurs in the world don't fucking drink. You know what I mean? Or they minimally like, you know, and I'm not knocking it by any means, but I just saw that I'm so serious about where I want this to go that I don't want to lose days on anything right now, right? And then, you know, with the balance, it's just you're your own worst enemy. You know what I mean? But I got put myself into a position where it's just when I think the grind's over, it just starts again. You know, like I've been on a grind for the last 3 or 4 weeks because we have a build going on in the background. We have a flip going on in the background with my brother. Real estate's picking up big time. The 4 on 4 off doesn't stop at all. But, you know, I don't, you know, I use all my time, you know what I mean? And if I get 2 hours of sleep here and there, my wife gives me hell for some of it because she, you know, when are you going to sleep? When are you going to get rest? And maybe that's why you go to bed at 8 and wake up at 5. You know what I mean? It's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different lifestyle. Like when you're running your own show and you want to be the disciplined, you want to be the routine, you want to stay focused. And that's the way I just feel that's my path now.
You know what? The most successful years of my life with my growth was when, because I was never a weekday drinker, never abused substances, whatever, but substance abuse, gambling, all that stuff came into play with just really high stress. And I've been reverting back to, because again, sometimes you get lost in things, friendships, partying, all that, and you take a step back and like, what's important? What the fuck do you care about? Really, at the end of the day, I care about my wife, our kid that we're having soon, or my dog, my family. Everything else doesn't matter.
Exactly.
So those are the first things. And how do I have the best life for them possible? It's growth. It's like, it's doing my projects and executing on them. It's executing on sales. And it's funny, like, even, you know, you get comfortable. I think you mentioned this when with the painting and stuff. It's like when you get comfortable and you're like, okay, well, I'm happy here. But like, you got to keep challenging yourself and keep trying to hit the next level. And it's fucking hard. Like, it's hard because you can numb yourself with things. You can numb yourself with eating, substances, all kinds of things. But I appreciate and respect your focus, and I'm getting back there too. Because like even tonight we're talking about, we don't want to play hockey at 10:30 because like I want to get up at 7 tomorrow and come to the office.
Exactly.
And that's a Saturday, and people are like, "What do you mean?" You're going like, "Dude, you don't understand how much fucking work I get done on a Saturday."
Yeah.
Because no one's emailing me, no one's calling me.
Yeah.
But then I think about you and how you're like these 4 on 4 off. I'm like, Jesus, I don't know how you're balancing that with. I mean, because you got to be working 70, 80 hours a week easy, right? Like,
well, it's work every day. Like, there's no not any type of work.
Where's your downtime? How are you not? Are you okay? So here, actually, sorry, I'll rephrase that. Do you find that you're able to keep that kind of work schedule and energy because of your focus on health and fitness?
Yeah. 100%. the discipline and the routine with training, cleaner lifestyle.
Yeah.
Well, it just helps. It's hand in hand, right? A very understanding wife. And there's a plan behind it, right? Like once we're expecting. So once, my goal at the end of the day would probably be to retire her, and then bring her and work for me eventually one day, possibly, if she wants to do that as well. Because I love her to death, and she works. The reason I married her was because she was the first person, doesn't matter who it was, that came around my life, male or female, that I looked at and said, this person almost works harder than I do, or does work harder than I do. I can't let that happen, especially if it's my wife. And that's been a catalyst too, right? Is that she lit a fire under me when we met to keep wanting to do that, right? Because she was like that, and that's why we work very well. And she's from Croatia, so she's European, right? So that's in their nature is to work hard, right? Yeah. Because you come here with nothing and you're poor, and everything that you have is because you actually have had to work for it, right?
Well, and it's interesting when you have those conversations about. I'm very fortunate. I got amazing parents. They've supported me, but like you, I've built everything from the ground up. And this is the reason why I won't interview anyone that's been handed a business. I want to interview founders because I want people that have started from nothing and built up.
Well, there's a story behind it, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, if you've been handed it, like, what's the story? Like, you just joined and you learned how to be
You're just managing people, basically. Yeah. Like, it's different when you're starting up and
it's the growing pains, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, the lonely days. It's the failing. I actually got used to failing, and it took me till probably I'm 36, but like the early 30s to understand that I actually enjoyed failing, because if I didn't fail at very specific times, I actually wouldn't be in the spot that I'm in. You know what I mean? I'm like, I watched two of my best buddies get into fire college before me, and out of our friends, if you were to look at us three and put all your money on the line, I'm like, I wouldn't have been the guy that didn't get in, but I was that guy. You know what I mean? And but I also wouldn't have been in the it's like the butterfly effect. I'm like, that one little thing leads to the next thing, and then the relationships that you build and the decisions too, right? Like when I was in Brandon in fire college, I remember being so proud that I got into that school. Back then, it was nearly impossible to get in there because it was 400 or 500 applicants, because it was in such a demand. And I remember not running around, but like going for a run in my my gear. And I'm so proud of where I got. I was like, I'm never going to paint another house again. I don't need any of it. This is my job. You know what I mean? I'm like, I have a career. And then I got out of school, and then it was like, well, wait a second. Get on the job. It's like, well, 4 days off. What are you going to do with the 4 days off? Well, I have all these skills that I've acquired. I'm like, I've been running the painting thing. I just put it on hold while I went to school and then got back home and applied those skills to my first house kind of thing, and realized that there's just more to it. And then that's, another catalyst that was just like, well, fire's one thing, and then the trades is another thing, and that's kind of the cliche thing that you hear from guys on the job. It's like 4 days off. I'm like, well, what do you do with your 4 days off? I'm like, well, I'm going to go and make more money than I did doing these 4 days off.
Do most guys have...
The generation's getting a little bit less like that.
Because I feel like, what are you doing with 4 days off? I would go crazy.
That's what I think. They play a lot of video games. Catch up on, some guys, if you're working in the core, you have to catch up on sleep, because we have the busiest fire department in Canada per cap for fires.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes, actually in North America, we're right behind New York.
Well, you know what? Give me a little bit of insight into the fire department. By the way, I love police, firefighters, all you guys. You guys have the craziest... You guys deal with the craziest shit that I would never understand.
Everything and anything.
Literally, you guys are usually first responders to things. So
everyone says, what's the craziest thing you ever seen? I was like, make it up in your head, and somebody has seen it or been around it. You know what I mean? It's, now it's, I don't know if you've seen the fires lately, that they've been pretty wild.
No, I don't watch local news at all, so I have no idea.
Yeah, Balmoral, we were just at one about my last tour. That thing flashed over so one station's just over here.
And when you say flashed over, you mean?
Yeah, so when the smoke gets super heated and it goes, right? And then it's like full blown, fire's blowing out the window.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But by the time the one station, the closest hall got there, it was already to flash over. And this thing, I was driving the chief that day, and it was so hot outside. that they were we could, of course our city has hydrants that don't work, so the first two hydrants didn't work. Took a couple minutes. It took a while to get water, because if one hydrant doesn't work, you got to go to the next one.
Why don't they work? There's broken pipes or frozen or
both.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know that. Sorry, so going back to flashover though. So sorry, that's when the fire gets so hot. And is it like a pressure thing? The smoke inside, the pressure, and then it just
like when it's really, really black, and you can see that turbulence.
Yeah,
and it's puffing out the window, and that's just imminent signs of a flashover.
It's gonna blow.
And then
so at that point, are you guys all just you're all back?
It's all defensive from there. But it was so hot with that they were going to soak the fire apparatus that was in front of it, because it was just getting that hot, and it was just blowing out the front of the window.
What's the craziest fire you've ever battled? Have you been in a situation like what? Sorry, what position are you in? How do the positions
currently right now? I'm not that senior, but I'm the senior guy at my hall right now. So they call that position the branch. So if we were to go into if we were first in on a fire, captain sits shotgun, driver's on the other side. Back left is the hydrant, and then there's what I'm currently right now is called the branch. So if we were going first into a working fire, I'm the guy that's grabbing the hose and then going and doing probably a 360 with my cap, or depending on the situation, might have to hit it quickly. It all depends on what you're seeing, right?
Are you going into the buildings to fight the fires? And
if it calls for it, right? If it's like the Balmoral was defensive from the start, right? Like you're not gonna risk to save nothing, right?
You knew it was gonna flash over.
Oh yeah,
and there was no point in going inside. Is what you're saying.
No one's going in. Well, how many houses are boarded up in this city now too, right? Like that's the problem that we're having now, is that most of the fires that we're going to are just vacant.
I see them on the way to work over by where the squash club is and that, and there's just a few of them are just down. I'm like, it's sad, like.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, right? So people just going by, squatters, and firebomb quickly, and it's
such a waste.
Yeah, well, it's better than pulling bodies out though too at the same time, right? If it's vacant, let it burn down, and that's it, right?
So we had Kristi's aunt had her house burnt down, and she lost a couple animals, and it was extremely sad, obviously, and she got really worked up because a couple of the firefighters made a joke about the fire, but I think and what the captain said was basically like that's their way of dealing with that stress and that kind of.
They call it the black humor, right? It's
because with the amount of stuff that you guys must see, how do you manage that? How do you deal with that?
Well, we have a SISM program, so if something bad, like if we go to the bad calls, we talk. They have a briefing after about it. You can, it's like the dressing room, right? Like you have your guys that you can talk to, and guys will talk, if they feel comfortable enough to talk about it. But at the end of the day, it's part of it just becomes normal, right? Like when you see death, you see the less fortunate scenarios, maybe the types of the way people are living, it is what it is, right? It's, you can't take that stuff home and let it you shouldn't, I should say you can't, because sometimes it's tough, because nobody wants to see a child die, but then again we do. Nobody wants to deliver a stillbirth, but yet we do. Nobody wants to pull out a body out of a burning building, but yet we do. You know what I mean? And that's just part of the job, right? So it's you training, healthy, it's all those things, healthy diet, training.
Well, and the other thing too, I think the majority of firefighters are still male, and males typically, like, we hold things in, and that's where a lot of our issues come from, and with mental health and that.
Yeah.
And so, and also the thing I've learned, I've had a friend that had work leave for about 6-7 months. He's not a firefighter; he's in another position, but similar. And he saw someone commit suicide. And we were joking about it. And he was laughing about it, but then he's like, "Yeah, I've been on depression medication and for 6 months." But you'd never know until we started talking. Like, oh well. And then I was like, the joking stopped, and I was like, oh, like, let's actually talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
And open up about it.
Yeah.
And is like, our firefighters,
guys reach out?
Do a lot of guys do they see therapists, or like, or is it through the program, the season program?
Yeah, or they'll just they'll go off on stress, and everybody's got a good friend on the fire department, right? So we do check up on each other, right? Everybody, you have the support is there, I don't think there's too many scenarios where you would, if you want to find yourself alone, then you find yourself alone. But
Yeah.
guys, you know, if you pick up the phone call when they call, you know, they'll be an organic conversation, and a checkup is really, hey, how are you doing? Everything okay?
Yeah.
Do you need anything? You know,
Being sincere also goes a long way.
100%.
I think a lot of times, again, in our circles of friends, there's a lot of joking. And sometimes it's hard to notice that someone's being serious and does need help.
Yeah, for sure. It's good.
Kristi, how are you doing? I haven't said anything yet this whole podcast.
I'm doing great. Yeah, I actually was just going to pop in and just say I want to clarify, because it sounded like you were saying that you were laughing at the you guys were joking about the suicide itself, but I want to clarify that that's not what you were joking about.
No.
You were joking about him being on an
right.
extended.
Thank you, on an extended leave because of that. Yeah, because the whole thing with that friend was, you know, it was like, oh, sweet, you're getting paid vacation for 6-8 months. But then it turns out he actually really did have depression and was going through stuff. And
Well,
I found
unless you
out
don't
through
know,
that.
you don't know too, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most guys, like most of our buddies, we're not open with that. And I think part of it is because our culture is we just make fun of everything. Yeah. It's just like we grow up partying, making fun of things. And it's like you're not a man if you're.
just don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, I think maybe that's a lot of it.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, in your line of work on firefighting, that's a whole different beast than just our 9-to-5 boys.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't understand what you guys do. I'm not going to try to say I understand it.
Yeah.
I just hear a lot of stories from firefighters, and
Supper
I'm like, man,
club, that's what the boys call
stuff,
it.
the supper club.
Yeah.
The stuff that you guys go through is just incredible. But what else do we want to talk about, Kristi? You got any other points? You have any questions for him?
Yeah, let's talk about some of the pivotal moments that led you to like start your company after going through firefighting, and what made you want to have more.
Yeah, I think well, the biggest one was when my old man passed when I was 24, and my brother's 22. At that time, I was, you know, trying to get on with Winnipeg. I was a medic out in St. Rose de Lac. That, you know, it's never easy losing anybody, but when you lose them young, you learn a lot of lessons, and they're very quick to learn. So what ended up happening through that, I quit the job. He finished his last university. My old man was like your typical hoarder type of guy. Like not a hoarder, but like just a Ukrainian that didn't throw anything out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, you know, we acquired all these skills like we were talking about, and we ended up deciding to flip his house. So we went through that route, and that's when I quit the job. I put my focus into that, and then my brother being a business guy, he's like, well, let's turn what we're doing into this project into a business, put it on paper and all that. And then, so that project went into, you know, about a year for us to get that done. And then,
Sorry, which project are you talking to?
so it was my dad's house. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so after he passed and everything, you do all the logistics with that.
Oh my God, I can
Yeah.
imagine dealing with all of that too.
Yeah. So I ended up getting on the job at that time too, within that period, and then
You got into fire college?
Yeah. And then so we were going to sell this house, and then my brother wanted to keep it, and then we made some decisions that my brother, he just couldn't decide what he wanted to do after university. And he's like, I'll be a teacher. I was like, yeah, you're not a teacher, man. It's like, yeah. And then I was waiting for it, and he's like, finally said, he's like, I'm going to apply to Brandon. And him being a smart dude, he was in the class in 3 months. And
Wow.
yeah, like he was, from the decision to graduating, getting on the job was like less than 2 years. It was really good for him. It was
And
really,
your
really,
brother and you guys are only 2 years apart?
Year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah,
Wow.
so really
That's
proud of him on that aspect. But then that turned into like our business never stopped, right? So we started doing insurance work, renovating. All my friends started buying houses. So who do you think they called to do the renos? You know, everyone's buying things that were depreciated, so they want to do the bathrooms, the kitchens, and you know, a lot of paint work and whatnot. But you know, even with him passing, I think it was, you know, his name's Roman and my name's Roman. You know, I'm the firstborn son, so you feel like you have a responsibility to, one, your last name, a responsibility to, you know, and we didn't have the best relationship when I grew up, but we were bending it towards like before he left. So it was like, you know, I just never I felt like I had to prove something still, right? Like he was very tough love, which I loved about him. You know, and you ask me how I keep doing what I'm doing and stay focused. And he had this like little hand signal, and he'd always do this every hockey game, every soccer game, no matter what sport I played. I would just look up at one point and he would do that. And that was an instillment in me to like, I've never been the best at anything, but I've always been the hardest working. And anybody that's been on a team I've played on will probably tell you that, yeah, that guy works harder than probably everybody else on the ice, on the pitch, whatever, right? And that's correlated into my life, into business, into wanting to be better and keep growing. And that's kind of where that was a very pivotal moment for sure.
Well, sorry. And so for people that are listening and watching, you did like a grinding your fist into your palm.
Yeah.
And that just signifies like keep grinding
keep going.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, keep going. Yeah. Like give an effort, right? Like don't stop. It's a mental thing, right? Like he wasn't a verbal, like I could just come out of a game and I could have scored 3 goals. He didn't care.
Yeah.
He's like, well, and he would tell me what I did wrong. You know what I mean? He's like, he would tell me if I was lazy that game, you know, those are the things that he would do, which was, honestly, I sucked when you're young. We're just like, well, what do I need to do to get a Slurpee here? You know what I mean?
Yeah. But was he kind of more soft spoken, or like what was he like, or was he really hard on you, or was he just like, hey, good game, but you fucked up here?
Yeah, a little bit of both, I think. I think he just had an expectation of us, right? And
he tried to keep you humble, it sounds like, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like I said, like we excelled at all the sports that we played, and we enjoyed being athletic, right? You know, not everyone has a privilege of playing sports and organized sports, right? Yeah. So, you know, he let us know, it's like, don't be wasting his money. You know, he works hard for this stuff, right? Like, we didn't come from a scenario where, you know, he used to, when we were kids, my brother was a goalie, mind you this. He used to drive from, and you know, he's still Ukrainian, right? He thinks he's saving money by buying one helmet. And so he, no joke. He would literally go from rink to rink and deliver the helmet to one of us instead of buying us both a helmet.
So you're
and it wasn't a black helmet. It was either a blue helmet or red helmet. And honestly, I love this about him though. And this is the things that I'm like, when I reflect, I was like, the things that he did were so important. I was like, and he said this, he's like, well, now everybody knows who you are on the ice. That's what he says. When we had the blue helmet and the red helmet. And I was like, now as an adult, I was like, well, fuck yeah. You know what I mean? I was like, it's really smart. You know, at the end of the day, I might hate it because I don't look like the rest of the people on the ice, you know what I mean? And whatever. But when you understand what he was doing, you know, was benefiting us, you know.
And for similar in my scenario growing up, like my dad as a carpenter had this like old Ford beat up red truck with rust holes in it, whatever. And again, same thing, like we didn't come from money, but what's funny about that is like, you know, maybe when I was young I cared. Now it's like I love my dad so much I don't care. But the skills I learned working for him, it's fine. I got friends that can't swing a hammer. I could build a house. And as I feel like as I get older, what you care about changes. Like I care so much about my parents. I want to see them more. It's like you shift, right? You're like you care for your family.
100%.
And like you and I are both going to be dads this year.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's like, how are we going to coach our daughters? You know, like I think about that, and you mentioned it before too. It's like when you get comfortable in something, it's like you stop growing. Yeah. And so you want them. It's like you want to push them to a point where they don't lose interest in what they're doing, but you also don't want to just reward them every time they score, because then they're, you know, it's like, is it just about scoring or is it about the effort you put in?
Right.
In that game?
Well, this participation stuff needs to stop, right? Like the biggest award I ever won was the very first award I ever that I won at 8 years old, and I was the most improved player. And that's probably another, as a child, when, like I said, you have to reflect. I believe that's the biggest thing that you should do as an adult, as an entrepreneur, because there's things like that happened in your life of why they did it, why you're doing it. And when I won that award that young, I was, you know, it's like, well, I got better. I got this because I got better, not because I scored the most goals. Yeah. You know, what does that mean? You know?
Yeah.
I got better. And I'm like, oh, so there's always room for improvement. And being lucky enough for that being my very first award, I still have that trophy because my mom kept everything. Yeah. You know, everything that we ever had, right? And I'm like, when my office is done, that award is going on the top shelf. You know what I mean? It's something I'll look at all the time because that's a big reflection of really why I like to answer a lot of these questions. For any entrepreneur, it's like it's those, you need to have things like that, right? That will show you something, right?
Well, and the interesting thing now, it's funny because I won like the SO, like most improved player award at the same age. I was never the best, but I always tried hard, which is important. But I think what's interesting now and where you and I are at and with our businesses and how we're growing is you don't really get, I think with where I get compliments now is like, for me in marketing is like, oh, that customer compliments where that looks great, whatever. But 99% of the time, you're just grinding and working and grinding and nobody's telling you you're doing a good job. There's none of that. You have to be very self-motivated and very driven to keep going. And again, it's because I don't search for that. I don't care.
Right.
When it does come, it's great. It's like even with your videos, like I'm like, those are great fucking videos. Keep doing those. And those little pushes sometimes, that's why same thing, I like to give compliments where compliments are due. Even if I had people that started businesses that didn't like me and maybe I didn't like them, I will still praise them if they're doing great work, growing, because it kind of shows you like you can do that too.
100%. Well, and it's, it's like that saying, it's like nobody wants to see, everyone wants to see you do good, but nobody wants to see you do better than them. And that's where I maybe I find myself when I think even now it's, when I get a compliment from the right people is when I really appreciate it, right? Like that's what it means to me, is like when someone's understanding, I understand the compliment because they understand what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Someone would be like, oh, great video. I'm like, okay, well, I appreciate that, thanks. But you probably actually don't know where that's going, and that idea, right? It's like when you saw that video, you understood what we're doing. You're like, you're seeing exactly because you're an entrepreneur. You're like, oh, I'm not seeing this out here. This is very unique. These guys have something else that's not being provided. I'm like, thank you. That's what I want to see. Because I'm like, and when I was talking earlier about when I would kind of like test my buddies, I was like, is that a real renovation or a render? You know what I mean? I'm like, that's what I want to get out of people, right? It's like, that's a compliment I want, is that if I can get that idea, then that's great. Then I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now, right? And it's growing. And, that's the motivating aspect of it. It's like, and if you love to grind, it does. You can have $1 million in your bank account. You have $1 billion in your bank account. The grind doesn't stop. It's never about the money.
No.
I'm like, if you're an entrepreneur or a businessman, it doesn't matter. I'm like, you're never doing it for the money. You're doing it for a purpose, and you're doing it because that's just who you are. You have those characteristics, and it's not a button you can turn off, right? Like I've had the conversation with my wife multiple times, right? It's like, when's enough? And I'm like, it's not about that. You know what I mean? It's like, I can't help that, that the growth is there. I'm like, you watch people stop growing all the time, right? And it's unfortunate where it's like, you put the effort in and you want it, go and get it. I'm like, especially the way the world works now, everything is literally in your hand. Grab your phone. You want to learn something, It's right there. Instead of sports betting all day and worrying about your fantasy teams, because you put so much, and that's such a distraction to you, put it into something that's of value. You know what I mean? Why complain? I'm like, you're complaining because for what reason?
Well, you know what, and I think about that a lot with people that are into that. And I think that's something that gives them some purpose, because something everyone wants to be good at something. Yeah. Like what I was always good at was building ideas into reality. Like, because I was going to say building businesses, but I'm not the best at building businesses. But what I am good at is having a vision for something and executing on it.
For sure.
And it's like I said, it's just not something just the everyday person's going to understand. But I also understand that they're happy with what they're doing, and if fantasy and that thing is if they're happy doing that, then good on them. But it's, for me, I get my joy in life from just like, it's just something about, and especially in your world, when I used to do renos and build houses too, it's like when you see a finished product, there's no better feeling than being like, we built this.
And maybe that's why we love paint, right? It's like, because a lot of the other trades you don't really see, but everyone sees the finished product of the paint, right? Yeah. And how well it's done and what comes with it, right? You're not going to see the plumber's tubes underneath and pipes and all that. And the basement and yada, yada, right? But
yeah, exactly. And you had mentioned earlier about an author that you like, or that entrepreneur. What was his name again?
Patrick Bet David.
Yeah, and you know, I've seen some of his videos.
Oh man,
online,
you got to get
and-
on him if you got to read his books too.
Well, I looked them up
Yeah.
before you showed up at the office today. Like, what are a couple of the books that you recommend that you've read?
His 5 next moves and know your enemy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And not your personal enemy, but and it's funny. It's like when you guys were asking, what are those things that were the catalysts, you know, in your life or whatever, and that's what it was. It's like it's enemies, right? It's those things that made you make the decision, the things that happened to you that drove you to do what you're doing, right? So at one point, I'm like, yeah, my dad passed away, but at one point, my dad was my enemy, like because he drove me, right? He gave me he put me in a spot to make myself better, to want to be better. You know, you have friends that are like that too, where they support you, or maybe they don't support you, they don't understand you, but they might even say something to you. Like, here's a good example. When I was 18, 19, when I started that painting business, right? I was the old guy that got into paint. Everybody else went into a big manly trade. And then we're at a buddy's party and so I had a business card. I'm like, why wouldn't you have a business card? So they take my business card, rip it up, make filters, and put them in the joint, you know, and then smoke the joint. You know what I mean? I was like, you know, that was an enemy right there. You know what I mean? I was like, I'll show you. You know what I mean? I'm like, I wasn't like crying about it at that time. I was just like, you guys are just dicks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Guys being guys or whatever. Fast forward 15, 16 years later, I remember every single one of those guys that was in that room doing it and where they're at today. You know what I mean? So it's great. And then and the 5 next moves. Like, what I love about a guy like Patrick Bet David is, I think as an entrepreneur, you know, you have these ideas in your head and these concepts. And I started, you know, I wanted to source people that thought like me. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I'm not finding it. Like I said, like I've said, I appreciate our quick conversations at hockey, but I'm like, I want to have these conversations with like-minded people so I can network better, so I can grow. I want to find people that are doing better than me so I can learn from them, rather being that guy where it's like I have, you know, the guys work for me at work kind of thing, or work with me, and, you know, they see what I'm doing and it's a little bit ahead of maybe where they're at, right? And I started following their content, and it's like, man, I'm like, these guys are literally saying what is going on in my head. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I thought exactly like that at like 26, 27. You know what I mean? I question things at times. I'm like, why are we learning? Why did I learn this in school, in like high school? This brought me no value. I'm like, why are we not learning this? I'm like, it would have brought me so much more value as an early young person, right? And that's what I loved about, you know, him too. And like, he's an immigrant to America from Iran, and he's a sports guy. So a lot of his stories are relatable to sports too, right? So for guys like us, I'm like, that's why we probably enjoy him a lot more too, is because a lot of his analogies and examples he uses from actual athletes. And like, Jordan is such a big one for him, right? Like when he talks about his enemies, I'm like, or not even just Jordan, but even it was Tom Brady is a big one for him. If you read his book, he explains this. He's like, Brady had a ton of enemies. First was the quarterbacks that got drafted before him. Then it became Belichick at one point because, you know, they didn't allow his nutritionist and his trainer on the field. They drafted Garoppolo at that time, right? So, okay, his replacement's coming in, so he got his rings. And then he goes over to Tampa Bay. He's got, at that point, I guess 5 rings, right?
Yeah.
I think. He's got 6 total, I think, right?
6, yeah.
And then who's his enemy? Well, Jordan becomes his enemy. Well, Jordan has 6 rings. And he wants, you know what I mean? So it's not like a direct personal enemy. Yeah. It's the concept of like, seeking something or using something to motivate you and to drive you to be better, right? You know, and that's what I loved. I'm like, and then when you understand a lot of these athletes too, it's like, you know, it's like now you know why they were so good at what they do. You know, the Kobe Bryant and like the Mamba mentality and the discipline and how hard he worked. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's why he was so good. Not just because he was Kobe Bryant. It was like because he would work out playing ball every single day, and he mentally would work harder than you.
Dude, Jordan, like that documentary about him, and just like he just outworked everybody. Everybody. He just outworked everybody. And even when he won his championships, he's like, I'm happy. I'm focused on the next one. Immediately after, he's like, I'm not even celebrating. Those guys are on a different level. But
100%.
I think one of the biggest things that's motivated me throughout my career was just all the doubt early on, from family, from friends. It's even at the start of the podcast, like the quotes that you see like are from people telling me like to get a real job, to do this. And it's like, and that's where I really just put up walls. It's like, you know what? None of what they can say to me is going to affect me. I have a vision. I'm going to do it. And then it's funny. Then years later, now it's like, oh, you're gonna take us on vacation. You're gonna do this and that. And it's like you still don't get it. But I think one of the craziest things that happened is when I was getting bullied in high school. I got a guy my age threw me up against the wall and choked me against the wall for no reason. Whatever. It's just a skinny kid in high school. And then like 10 years later, asking me for a job. I think that was the full circle. I think that was that full circle thing. And so, I think it's funny with you and I think there's just so many similarities in our stories and how we've come to where we are. And I think the biggest thing is just like, it's the things that keep us motivated. It's hard to explain. I think you did a good job of it today, but a lot of it for me has just been the doubters. Like I don't get motivated by people saying I'm doing well. I get motivated by people telling me I can't do something. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're like, oh, you're doing amazing. I'm like, how do you even know that?
I get the, you're doing that. Now you're doing this. It's like, And do you have another question? Do you have a follow-up question? Do you like to know more about what I'm doing? You know? What are you doing?
What are you doing? How's your football fantasy team going? But you know what, buddy, I think that was a great conversation. Thanks for coming down, dude. Keep fucking going, man. You're killing it.
Thank you.
And when Kristi and I need to get some renos done, we're coming to you.
Yeah. And selling those.
Or buying. Yeah, well, we'll see.
Investing.
Okay, buddy. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. Okay.
Cheers.